I just jotted down some things that I believe are currently going on in the marketplace. One, it's a very borrower-friendly environment. A lot of companies could get a loan now, unlike years and years ago, like 2008. So there's a lot of dollars chasing one deal, and there aren't too many deals. I was telling Jeffrey, I was extremely busy last year, and I did 6 or 7 deals here in New York. And it was all of a sudden January very, very quiet. January, February was very, very quiet for me. And now it's just starting to pick up. And so, you know, I look at that and say, you know, what's happening? There's been some uncertainty about the banking deregulation, right? Deregulation of banks. So the banks are staying and saying, do I finance this company? Do I throw this company out? Do I not want to finance this company? So that hopefully that uncertainty is a little bit down the road. I don't think there's going to be a priority in this administration at the moment of deregulating in a major way banks. There's no way that Trump is going to do deregulation on capitalization of banks or stress test of banks. What may happen, in my opinion, is that banks will take buckets of assets to say, I could do this kind of deal, I could do a more richer kind of deal. So there'll be buckets, and the Fed will come in and say, gee, that bucket is too high, or that bucket is way too aggressive, you know, sell these assets. So right now, in every category of financing, there's an abundance of capital in the marketplace, including what I do. ABL lenders are very robust in capitalization. A lot of capital chasing very few deals. So we have price compression, both on the factoring business and on the ABL business, because there's not enough business right now. And the other observation that I have is that, and you read this yesterday, so in every segment of the banking business, you know, the bank deals, the leveraged finance cash flow deals, the ABL deals, you know, mezzanine finance, all of them being compressed in price, and the structures are aggressive to win business. The other observation I have is the small banks. Is there any small banks here? No, they don't know what they're doing.
And we can talk.
They
I want to ask it this way.
They don't have the resources.
Any of you bank with small banks?
Yeah. They don't have the resources, and they have to check a box politically to say that they lent money to a small business. It's called call reports. So you have to check a box to say, I lent money to, so you can help, you know, the American economy prosper. So I view that as a big risk in our American economy. The other thing that's occurring is the Fed is increasing interest rates. When you increase interest rates, what happens, right? Your money supply goes down. They start buying back bonds that they used to do in the credit easing, you know, years ago, or a couple of years ago. So the pool of deposits, in American banks are going to go down. If the pool of deposits in American banks are going to go down, that means that the smaller banks are going to be stressed in lending money to small businesses. So the smaller banks, in my opinion, have been told to finance smaller businesses. They don't have the resources to do it. They're going to have capitalization issues because of deposits. And Jamie Dimon agrees with this. And you know who Jamie Dimon is? He's chairman of JP Morgan Chase. And so there's going to be some falling out on the small end. And I say this to you because most of the bigger banks where I used to work for are no longer doing business with small entities. You know, if you're doing a deal at $15 million or below, they're like, that's peanuts for me. I don't want to do that business. I'm not going to make any money, so go away. And that's where we
Do you see regulation
ramping up a little bit to what have been traditionally non-regulated lenders? And I'll tell you where
That's a great question.
my head is coming from. I think what I see going on, is everybody familiar with the concept of merchant cash advance? This is, if you go online, you want to borrow money, they dominate, they pay to get the top hits, and, apply today and you'll have your money later today or tomorrow. I'm not gonna say that they're all shady characters, but there are a lot of very shady character lenders. I got involved in a matter a number of months ago. A business broker called me who was trying to get a deal closed. The company was borrowing $3 million, and the company had a merchant cash advance line that they couldn't get a payoff letter. They were trying to pay off. So they sent me the stuff, I take a look at it, and you'll see how things grow in, and they had merchant cash advance from a whole bunch of places. It's all gonna get consolidated into this $3 million line of credit. The company borrowed $90,000, not a lot of money, borrowed $90,000 on March 3rd, 2016. And the way that works is that you repay it every day. And every day there's an ACH transfer out of the borrower's bank account. 3 weeks into the deal, there was a hiccup with the ACH, and the merchant cash advance company entered a judgment 3 weeks after the borrowing for $142,000. And then just tried to hold them up. So I saw how unscrupulous some of these guys are. Now that's to say that they're all like that, but because there's a lot of that going on, and that borders the line between consumer lending and commercial lending. When you're UPS and you're running a $500 million line of credit with a group of banks, no one's looking at you. You're only dealing with regulated guys, and it's strictly commercial. But when you're a small business and you're financing your business very often with your personal assets and your personal credit, that kind of pushes the world of commercial finance, and that is causing regulators to say, hey, time out, we've got to take a closer look at what's going on in the non-bank, non-regulated commercial and possibly even consumer world. Consumer finance is regulated, and when you have commercial finance, consumer finance that tries to hold themselves out as being commercial lenders, they're going to get regulated, and that's the problem. So at what point does that sweep from just this $90,000 MCA borrower into a reputable company like yours, and does it end up making your world of lending a little more difficult?
Well, it does, because the MCAs, when a company has no liquidity, what an MCA does, it basically lends money on future cash flow of the business, right? So future cash flow. So the MCA, to Jeffrey's point, they're charging 30–40% because they don't know what that future cash flow is going to be, right? The problem with dealing with MCAs as a lender and as a company, they could interrupt the chain of supply. They could interrupt the chain of customers because they have access to your customers, okay? So the customers can be called upon by the MCA and say, hey, this company owes me legally, this company owes me, you have to pay me now because the company is not in existence. So it unravels the viability of the business in a big way that we don't like it, because then they're in control. But I hope that the government does regulate them. There's a big company called On Deck Capital. I don't know if you know that. On Deck Capital, publicly traded company, right? Formed by very, very smart guys. They created an algorithm. One of the guys is the former chairman of American Express. They created the algorithm of what a good credit is about. An algorithm is a mathematical kind of like formula to say, okay, put it in the box and, okay, I could lend you $50,000. They just announced today on deck that they lost $11 million for the quarter after writing off $46 million of loans. And for the quarter. And before that, last year it was like 20 million, the ones that they wrote off. So they charge 30%, but they write off 40%. So I don't know if the model makes sense. So we'll see what the government's gonna do.
Take it that everyone is familiar with having point of sale software, right? Everybody deal with point of sale. So essentially what happens is, I walk into Home Depot and I buy a drill. That drill is out of their inventory, takes it out of inventory. They get a truck in the next day, and they scan it in, and it's now in their inventory. They at all times know. You go on, take a look at Home Depot's website. They've got, I need light bulbs. They've only got 2 of the kind I need in Freeport, but if I go to Jericho, they've got 700 of them. So that type of software is great. What this does, the next piece of background. The next piece of background, is everybody familiar with the Sports Authority, or with the company formerly known as the Sports Authority? Sports Authority, I didn't realize when we go into the stores, and I suspect most of you don't, that most of the product on their shelves were there by consignment. So ASICS was the law when Sports Authority filed for bankruptcy, and I got a call within an hour. So I started to take a look. I said, wow, I'm surprised. Why would ASICS be a $45 million creditor? Why? Because it wasn't that the stuff wasn't paid for, is that it wasn't owned by the Sports Authority. It was all consigned. And when you deal with consignment, many of the suppliers properly consigned, many were unsophisticated and did not properly consign, which made them unsecured creditors. So if they were consigned, then like ASICS was properly consigned, the goods on the shelves belonged to ASICS, and when you walked in and bought a pair of sneakers, the Sports Authority had to pay ASICS, I think, within 10 days. But Sports Authority was in trouble, so they weren't paying in 10 days. And so that turned the whole thing upside down. And that's what got us thinking about doing it the following way. And companies like Home Depot tie up a lot of their capital on inventory. And so the objective here is to get the goods on the shelves off of the Home Depot balance sheet, correcting the model from Sports Authority, and keep it on the balance sheet of the distributor, the supplier. So if you take all the pieces and put it together, the technology is there, it just is getting pieced together. So when you walk into the big box and you scan your American Express card, or your Visa or MasterCard, or Discover card, okay. I guess this is the Buyers Club, but I don't know what to use. And you scan that, not only are you purchasing, you are taking out of their inventory, you are closing the sale between the supplier and Home Depot, but at the same time, when you scan it, and American Express gets the data that for the $110 pair of sneakers that you just bought, the tax probably still goes to the retailer. Yes, I switched from Home Depot to Sports Authority. But let's say 40% goes to ASICS to pay on the consignment, and then the 60% goes to the retailer. But it's I believe it's going to become a future product that is going to get very big. Because it does make sense, and you don't have to run the risk, because then you go to the ASICS of the world and you say, I know, you already gave in to Sports Authority by consigning your goods. This way you're going to be sure you're going to get paid. And instead of having the retailers string you out for, you know, yes, you're selling on 30-day terms, but they pay you on 60, they get in trouble, they're paying you 90, paying you 120 days. Instead of having your receivables age out, you're either gonna take your goods off the shelf and take it back, or as it gets sold, you're gonna get it.
What happens when you come back to return the drill?
It gets worked out the same way. It's just as you reverse, it's gotta be a two-way system. I take all the EDI systems can do that, it can go both ways. What happens when you go and return the drill now? So it goes back in inventory, A lot of this becomes ledger debt.
Right.
You know, it's done. Anybody dealing in Bitcoin? Anybody have any blockchain monies going back and forth? Yeah, I worry about it, but it's gonna happen. Bitcoin and, you know, blockchain, it's gonna be there.
Why?
Because somebody said so. No, it's, I think it's supposed to balance out the global economy. And instead of, you know, having issues with international currencies, it becomes the international currency. I'm not telling you I'm comfortable with it. There's, you know, I worry about it a lot. And I do have clients who are dealing in Bitcoins, and typically my response is, what are you, a schmuck or something? But there are parts of the world where you really, so I'm not saying it's something that's gonna be high on your agenda of financial issues to address, but it's gotta be on there. It's gotta, you know, I think at some point you're gonna take a position. The first time you get a customer who wants to deal in Bitcoin,
Right.
you know, you're gonna decide whether you're gonna take that customer or not. And it'll be your first time, so be ready for it. The topic of supply chain is always interesting, and I grew up primarily as a factoring lawyer, and so supply chain was very important in factoring, but the term really has expanded. When you stop to think about it, I think its use is much broader than is often presented. I took a quick look online. I saw a very recent article from CFO magazine, and already I take exception. And it says, let's start with a key question: what is supply chain finance? Supply chain finance is when supplier invoices get financed by a bank on the basis of the creditworthiness of the buyer. Well, that's essentially factoring, but okay. The supply chain finance program is when a large buyer's CFO approaches its bank asking to set up, also known as reverse factoring, a program for a number of suppliers. Domestic factoring, now there's international factoring, and I suspect Sam is going to get to that, because one of the reasons I wanted Sam to join us is this: not only is his company one of the preeminent factoring companies, but they're international. Their reach goes out way beyond. Because when it comes to having your bank, assuming you're the bigger company, provide financing for the smaller supplier, especially one that may be overseas, you run into a lot of KYC, know your customer issues, and that doesn't always work out to be the perfect solution. So the factoring, using an international factor, may be better. So Sam is one of the preeminent lenders in the New York environment. I've known him for a very long time. He's been at a number of institutions. Why? Because he gets cherry-picked, and they say, if we're doing something, let's get Sam Sorelli here to see if he can do it. Right now, he's Senior Vice President at Bibi Financial Services, and which is English-based? English. UK-based. Before that, he was managing partner at Northern Lights Partners. Before that, he was at Lloyd's. He was at Manny Hanny, for those of us who are old enough to remember Manufacturers Hanover, which is now rolled into J.P. Morgan. He was at the CIT Group. He was at GMAC, which I guess now turned into Ally, who I saw advertised on TV now, and Wells Fargo. He also was president of the RBS Business Capital, that was Royal Bank of Scotland. We dealt with each other at HSBC. He's been in a bunch of places because He has a very broad knowledge, and when I stop to think about the areas that he's really, I've seen him in, it's really supply chain. And you know, the term chain is so important in supply chain, not only when you are getting your product in, I suspect most of you are looking into how to get product in the door, but those, like Barbara, who look out from the, you know, the dollar signs or euro signs of how product gets in the door, you know, you always have to worry, not only will my supplier not be able to deliver product, but will my supplier have financing so that it can deliver product? So your company is as a link in that chain, you know, I love the term in restaurants now, you know, farm to table. That's essentially what the chain is. It goes from the farm right to the table. So when you're watching and financing, and I also spent probably too much of my time in insolvency proceedings, you know, and when you know, a company goes into bankruptcy, you know, not only is the guy who's running that company dealing with a problem, but the people who relied on that company, either for goods, because that company was a supplier, or because that company was a customer. Everybody's is affected. So any weak link in the chain causes a domino effect, and so that's, you know, that just opens the door to the very wide spectrum of supply chain finance, from PO at one end to large syndicated finance. You know, the big story that came out when after General Motors was in bankruptcy, you don't think of them as being small, but certainly the big guy in the supply chain is what got screwed up in their financing. That the UCC inadvertently was released, and JP Morgan Chase went from being a $1.5 billion secured creditor to a $1.5 billion unsecured creditor. We'll talk about that another time, but that's the other end of the chain where you don't expect to see the problems. The problems can come up anywhere. How do you avoid the problems? See if the financing is done right. And with that, I pass you to my friend Sam.
All right, thank you. I work for first of all, thank you very much for listening to me, and to Jeff. Thank you, Jeff, for inviting me. I'm delighted to be here. I've been in this business for a very, very long time. I'm an adjunct professor also at NYU, and I actually formed a bank. What Jeff didn't mention is I actually formed a wholesale international bank. I was hired by a very, very wealthy billionaire who hired me to help form a global bank before the crisis occurred. And I did that successfully. I currently work at a company, and I was very fascinated by the fact that I worked at major financial institutions at JP Morgan, Chase, Wells Fargo, HSBC. And they were never very internationally focused, other than HSBC. During the time that I was employed, and I wanted something a little bit more international focused. So I decided to join and form a bank that was involved in that process. It was called Lands Bank. And I was supported by a very, very wealthy man that owned soccer teams and stuff in Europe. And we financed international businesses. We were the only company in New York that was able to do that successfully before the crisis occurred. And then the crisis occurred and they all sent us home, unfortunately. So what we did was we helped, I'm an asset-based lender, so we helped global companies worldwide help move product, fund product through all the distribution channels that we had. And we were the only, and we were a $50 billion bank at the time, not a big bank. And it intrigued me that I was able to help mostly private equity firms to help build their businesses so they could sell them for a lot of money going forward. And we helped them do that on an international scale. And the opportunity came up to work for a company called Bibby, which you've never probably heard of. Who's heard of Bibby Financial? I know Jeff has. Okay, no one has ever heard of Bibby Financial. We're not as big as UPS, but we are one of the founders of supply chain finance. And you'll say, how so? Bibby Financial is a 208-year-old, sixth-generation, privately held finance business that's located in 14 countries, owned by a very, very wealthy billionaire. And we finance companies all over the world. Mostly with private equity firms we do. My recent deal that I did with a company called Turnspire Capital, they bought an electronic company. Can't tell you the name of it. They bought an electronic company. The electronic company was based in Dallas, New Hampshire, Pennsylvania, Houston, China, Singapore, Hong Kong, among other places, and we found a solution. And we're a small little company, we're only $4 billion in assets. So we found a solution on how this company, this electronic company, integrated from China into the US by helping them finance that business there so they could bring product here, get the cash out of China, and get paid that way. So, that's what we are. We're a very internationally focused business. I don't finance companies like big companies like yourself. I finance middle market, small end of the middle market. And we take enormous risk in helping small little businesses finance their operations. And one of the products that we have is PO financing. Does everybody know what PO financing is?
PO?
PO, purchase order financing. So this is a very risky product. We help companies. We're launching the product here in the States. We've been in America for about 65 years. It's UK based. We're owned by one guy, Sir Michael Bibby. He's worth, I don't know what he's worth, $2 billion, $3 billion bucks. And what we do is, in Europe is we have a product called PO financing, which basically finances something before it's shipped. So if you have usually it's non-cancelable PO purchase orders, they'll finance in overseas to bring product and move product internationally. Now, there's a lot of risk with that because something could go wrong, significantly could go wrong. The customer could change their mind. They don't want a green shirt, they want a yellow shirt. The customer could go bankrupt, or the supplier could go bankrupt. So we do that, and we help businesses with their financing. I'm looking at a company right now that's owned by an investor group here in California, here in New York. Their facility is in California. And they're a furniture company. They're an outdoor furniture company. And what they do is they basically import furniture to the big box retailers, and they have this major supplier overseas in China, and they have, it's a business where it has very seasonalness to it, especially in the summertime. And what they have is, $7-8 million worth of purchase order from customers. So we look at their purchase orders and we say, gee, those solid purchase orders from vendors, from customers, and we finance that, okay, to help them bring that product to you so they can make it sell and the like. But at the end of the day, what we are, we're lenders, right? We're lenders to them. We're unregulated, so I could do a deal that's unregulated, unlike the banks when I was working for a bank. There's lots of regulation, and you have to take tests every month. You have to take a test and pass it to make sure that you're a good abiding.
Take out a piece of paper, not from 1 to 10.
Yeah, right. So this platform for us is unregulated, and we can do whatever we want to with respect to the kind of deals that we do.
So still subject to KYC?
Still subject to KYC because we have a multi-billion-dollar bank facility with Bank of America and HSBC and Citi. So we have to comply with that.
And OFAC and
Yes, we have to comply with that, yes.
And stop us anytime we use
Yeah.
certain things, Ken, so.
Could you explain that last acronym?
KYC, know your customer.
Oh, okay.
So it's a banking term where the bank, I mean, it's pretty simple stuff where you have to know your customer as a banker before you accept their money or lend money to them. I mean, it's a very simple concept, but
Due diligence.
that's, yeah, due diligence. So, and you have to fill out forms and stuff like that. So we need to do that to comply with our credit facilities within our lending parameters.
The regulation on that has gotten tougher. It's one of the few areas that really affects non-bank finance companies, but the objective is, especially after 9/11, was to see to it that funding isn't going to terrorists. And so that's a piece that's behind it, although the concept of know your customers has been around in the banks for a long time, because, you know your customer, you want to know that you're going to get your money back. You know, it's easy to put money out, but getting it back is sometimes a little more difficult.
Yeah. I just jotted down some notes about the current credit environments within.
Could we pause a second
Yeah.
on PO financing, so we can all understand it, because I suspect that there'll be people in the room who are on either end of PO financing. So if you are relying on suppliers to get product to you, you may want to help them see with that the purchase order that you've issued to them gets fulfilled. Now, we do a good deal of PO financing work, but there are different variations of it. You guys do PO financing, you also do factoring. The situations I've seen go one of two ways. First, you finance the purchase order, and when the goods get shipped, it turns into an invoice. At that point, the factor or the asset-based lender advances against those invoices. The PO lender gets paid off.
Correct.
So, how does your company fit in to? Do you cover the whole spectrum, or the third parties that can go either way?
We will at some point. We're an expert in PO financing in the UK and in Europe. So what we do is when we have a PO financing here in the States, we team up with other folks. And like Jeffrey said, was, when the goods come in, they get inspected. You pay the supplier. The supplier goes away. You have their goods. The goods come in your warehouse. You invoice. Once you invoice, I have an intercreditor agreement with a PO financing company that I have to pay them immediately, or else my lien is primed by their. You're the attorney. Yeah. My lien is primed, so I have to pay them, and then I advance against the receivables, either factor the receivables or finance the receivables on an ABL structure. Yes.
Isn't that conceptually like factoring?
It is.
Reverse?
It is. I mean, it really is, but I think it's riskier, in my opinion, than factoring. Because in factoring, you're actually buying that receivable. In PO financing, that's even before shipping, it's pre-shipping. Yeah, there's a lot of stuff could go wrong.
Most of the PO financing I see, your scenario, you put it into the warehouse. Most of the PO financing I see never gets to your warehouse. It's drop shipped to
To the customer?
Okay.
Yeah, okay.
And this way, it just takes one of those prongs of a risk that you're describing, takes out of it. I guess it's not always possible. If we're selling to him, for example, where he gets a whole bunch of widgets that are going out to a zillion people, well, it may have to get broken down.
So you basically, physically, you take over the process of inspecting the goods, no?
I don't. I hire somebody that does that. We hire
You
somebody
take
that
over
does
the
it.
process.
Yes. Because the goods could be not what you ordered, so I'm protecting myself and the customer. And the customer pays for that service.
And
That's inexpensive. Agents are all over, yeah.
And the product works great, I see, and you're correct, because this comes to your side of the street. But when you have younger companies that have orders but don't necessarily have the financial resources to get their product manufactured. Also, on the other end of the spectrum, companies in financial distress. Someone's going to stop shipping them when someone isn't paid. So your PO financer comes in and says, look, make the goods, custom manufacture those goods for them. We're backed up either by the strength of of being bippy, or the strength of a letter of credit that's out there, or some other kind of financial accommodation, so that before someone starts to go out and buy raw materials to fill that purchase order, he knows he's gonna get paid. Of course, that doesn't mean that there won't be a dispute, as Sam said, if the guy makes green shirts instead of yellow shirts, well, you know, that's gonna be a problem when he sends his documentary papers out.
Right, and the other risk that we take is supplier risk, right? So if the supplier can't deliver, that's a problem, right? So he has RLC or cash sometimes. So if the supplier can't deliver, then the customer has a problem, we have a problem, right? But most of the times that when we're doing PO financing in Europe, the product generally can change. So like Jeffrey said, we'll take, you know, the product can be drop shipped directly to the customer, but there are occasions where the product in Europe I've seen some deals where the company does some level of manufacturing. The product has to come into the warehouse, at some level of manufacturing, not a whole lot, some 1 or 2 day turnaround, and then the product is shipped. That's even more riskier because you have to rely on the employees of the business, the capitalization of the business, the liquidity of the business, etc. So that's sometimes we look at that very, very carefully, and we don't like doing that, but depending on the relationship and how well the company is capitalized, we'll make exceptions.